Tonight on the Midnight Drive, there are roads in Hawaii where people will quietly tell you not to stop after dark. Not because they're trying to scare you, not because they're trying to convince you that ghosts are real, because some stories aren't about belief. They're about respect. For generations, people have spoken of the night marchers, ancient Hawaiian warriors said to travel the paths beneath the moon. Their presence announced by distant drums, torchlight, and chanting carried on the wind. If you encounter them, tradition says you don't investigate. You don't reach for your phone. You don't try to capture the perfect video for social media. You step aside. You lower your eyes. You let them pass. Maybe they're trying to teach us something much older than fear. Humility. There are some stories that ask you to believe in ghosts. The night marchers ask something much stranger. They ask you to be polite. And I don't know why that fascinates me so much, but it really, really does. Maybe it's because so many modern horror stories begin with somebody making the absolute worst decision imaginable. There's always that one person who hears a noise in the basement and says, "I'm going to check it out." Or they find an abandoned hospital and decide it would be a great place to spend the night. Or they discover a mysterious videotape that literally says, "Do not watch." And naturally, they pop popcorn and invite friends over. We've somehow turned curiosity into a spectator sport. The night marchers tell a completely different story. If you hear drums, move. If you see torches, step aside. If you realize you're standing on a sacred path, don't make yourself the main character. Just let the procession pass. And honestly, that's probably good life advice whether ghosts exist or not. I've been thinking about that a lot this week because Hawaii keeps confronting me with the same idea from different directions. Respect the ocean. Respect the mountains. Respect the volcanoes. Respect the stories. Respect the people who have lived here for generations. Respect doesn't require certainty. Pay attention to that distinction. I don't have to understand every tradition to acknowledge that it matters to somebody. All right? Let me say it again. I don't have to understand every tradition to acknowledge that it matters to somebody. I don't remove my hat in an old cathedral because I think the ceiling will collapse if I don't. I remove it because I'm walking into a sacred space that somebody else considers sacred. That's respect. And respect is becoming an increasingly rare posture. We've become remarkably great at consuming places. Every overlook needs a selfie. Every mural becomes a backdrop. Every quiet moment somehow turns into content. Sometimes I wonder if we've forgotten how to simply arrive somewhere. To look, to listen, to leave without feeling obligated to take a piece of it home. Which brings us back to the night marchers. For anyone unfamiliar with the legend, the basic story is wonderfully simple. Ancient Hawaiian warriors are said to continue marching along old trails and roads long after their death. People describe hearing distant drums, conch shells, chanting, torchlight moving through the darkness. And the advice that accompanies those stories is remarkably consistent. Don't interfere. Don't stare. Step aside. Show respect. Now, I'm sure somebody listening right now is already trying to decide whether they believe this literally. Do you want to know what? I don't know. I really don't. Maybe there are perfectly ordinary explanations. Maybe people hear wind moving through valleys. Maybe moonlight plays tricks with distance. Maybe generations of storytelling shape the way we experience unfamiliar places. Or maybe folklore preserves something that refuses to fit neatly inside a scientific paper. I'm comfortable sitting in that uncertainty. Actually, the older I get, the more comfortable I become saying those 3 words. I don't know. Because certainty is strangely exhausting. Every conversation on the internet feels like 2 people desperately trying to prove they've already figured everything out. Very few people seem interested in simply wondering anymore. Wonder takes humility. Wonder says, I might be wrong. Wonder says, tell me more. Wonder says, that's interesting. And I think that's exactly why stories like the Night Marchers have survived. They're not asking us to solve anything. They're asking us to adopt a posture. Slow down. Pay attention. Recognize that you're moving through a place with history deeper than your own experience. You know, I've always loved visiting old churches, not because I'm particularly interested in architecture, although some of them are absolutely stunning. It's because every single person who walks inside instinctively gets quieter. Nobody hangs a sign on the front door that says, please whisper. Sorry, please whisper. Nobody posts a security guard reminding people to lower their voices. They just do. Something about the place quietly changes behavior. Libraries do the same thing. So do museums, even cemeteries. We become aware that we are participating in something larger than ourselves. And I wonder if spirit roads function the same way. Maybe the story isn't trying to frighten anybody. Maybe it's simply reminding us that these paths have been walked for generations. Long before rental cars, long before highways, long before GPS calmly announcing, in 500 feet, turn left. People traveled these valleys carrying families, food, songs, news, grief, celebration. Entire lives moved along these roads. That's enough history to deserve a little reverence. There's another detail I find incredibly beautiful in all this. The Night Marchers are never described as wandering aimlessly. They are purposeful, disciplined, moving together towards some destination that apparently still matters. There's so much dignity in that image. No chaos, no screaming, no chasing unsuspecting tourists through hotel parking lots. Just steady footsteps. Drums echoing into the night. Torchlight reflecting against volcanic stone. An ancient procession continuing exactly as it always have. If I were driving a quiet road on the Big Island late at night and somebody who had lived there their entire life looked over and said, if you hear drums, just pull over and let them pass. You're listening to the Midnight Drive, and tonight we're talking about the Night Marchers, and we're talking about spirit roads. And to recap, if you're driving along with a local late at night, the person who lives there tells you, if you hear distant drums, just pull over, let them pass. I'm certainly not stepping into the middle of the road yelling, "Hey, excuse me, can I ask you guys a few questions for my podcast?" Absolutely not. Partly because I respect local traditions, partly because it feels like the polite thing to do. Some mysteries don't need solving. Some roads simply ask us to travel them with humility. And honestly, I think the world could probably use a little more of that. Don't you think? You know what else I find interesting? Not every culture has roads that you're not supposed to walk alone. Almost every culture has roads that you are not supposed to walk alone. Not because they're physically dangerous, because they carry stories. The Appalachian Mountains have trails where locals will casually tell you not to whistle after dark. Scotland has ferry paths that farmers still refuse to build across. Japan has forests where people instinctively lower their voices. The American Southwest is filled with places where visitors are politely reminded that photographs are not always appropriate. And Hawaii has spirit roads. I've been thinking about that phrase all week. Spirit roads. There's something incredibly poetic about it, because every road is a spirit road if enough people have walked it. Think about the sidewalk you took to elementary school, or the driveway where somebody taught you how to ride a bicycle, or the hallway outside your grandparents' bedroom. Those places become haunted in a very ordinary way. Not by ghosts, but by memory. You can't convince me otherwise. There are songs that immediately transport me back 25 years. There are smells that instantly remind me of childhood Christmas mornings. There are old gas stations in tiny Midwestern towns that somehow make me miss road trips that I haven't taken in decades. Memory has a geography. We carry maps inside of us. Maybe places carry maps as well. I don't know. Maybe it's nonsense, but I keep coming back to something we talked about on Monday. Stone tape theory. That idea that emotion somehow leaves an impression on a location. I'm not saying that I believe that literally. I honestly don't know enough to say. But I do think that human beings have an incredible ability to feel history without necessarily understanding why. Walk into Gettysburg. Walk into Pearl Harbor. Walk into Auschwitz. People become quieter. Nobody needs instructions. Nobody says, "Please feel reverence." The place itself seems to ask that. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because reverence is becoming an endangered emotion. We're very good at consumption. Not nearly as good at contemplation. I caught myself doing it in Hawaii. Looking for the next beach, the next overlook, the next restaurant, the next experience. Always moving, always optimizing, always trying to squeeze every possible memory into a single vacation. Then one night I sat down beside the ocean and realized I hadn't actually really looked at it yet. I'd seen it. I'd taken pictures of it. I heard it. I walked beside it. But I hadn't just sat there with no destination, no agenda, no camera. Just me and the waves. One after another. For nearly an hour. and absolutely nothing happened. Nobody appeared. No mysterious lights, no ghostly voices. No ancient warriors emerged from the darkness. It was just me in the water. Yet somehow I left feeling like I'd experienced more than I had during the rest of the day combined. Maybe because attention is becoming rare. Maybe because silence gives the mind enough room to catch up with itself. Maybe because places finally get a chance to speak when we stop narrating over them. I've wondered if that's why so many legends survive. Not because people are irrational, because stories slow us down. Imagine driving a quiet road at midnight. You remember hearing that this valley belongs to the night marchers. Suddenly you're paying attention. You're listening. You're noticing the wind, the trees, the stars, the way moonlight reflects against volcanic rock. Even if absolutely nothing supernatural occurs, the story changed the way you experience the place. That is real. That is measurable. And that is powerful. I've noticed something else. The night marchers never ask us to conquer fear. They ask us to simply practice humility. Those are very different things. Fear says, I'm in danger. Humility says, this moment is not about me. What a radical idea in 2026. Everything encourages us to become the main character. Post it, review it, rate it, react to it, monetize it. Turn every experience into proof that we existed. Meanwhile, somewhere in Hawaii, there's an old road where the story simply says, if something older than you comes through, move. No debate, no live stream, no comment sections, just respect. I think that's beautiful. And maybe that's why I keep returning to these stories. Not because I'm searching for evidence. I'm searching for perspective. Perspective that reminds me I didn't invent the world. Perspective that reminds me civilizations existed before mine and will almost certainly exist after mine. Perspective that reminds me some traditions deserve curiosity before criticism. One of my favorite things about traveling is discovering that ordinary people quietly carry extraordinary stories. Ask somebody where they're from. Listen long enough. Eventually, they'll say something like, oh, there's this road nobody around here uses after dark. And they won't smile. They won't wink. They'll just say it as though they're describing the weather. Matter of fact. Inherited. Part of the landscape. Maybe that's what folklore really is. Not history, not science, not proof. Community, memory. A conversation stretching across generations.